Well, the Shadow Chancellor is with us now. Whose idea was it to bring back the 50 pence tax rate?
I think the whole Shadow Cabinet has been behind this since we've been exposing the 50p cut a year ago. Ed Miliband and I discussed this in the early summer. We both decided it was the right thing to do. There was a question about when it was the right time to make this clear, and we wanted to get this right, but it was a joint decision of ourselves, but also the whole Shadow Cabinet's behind it.
Were they consulted about it?
Well, of course they were. So
the whole Shadow Cabinet was in on the discussion about the 50 pence rate?
All the Shadow Cabinet discussed it before the speech on Saturday. I have discussed with them the top rate of tax cut and its unfairness many times in the last year, and we've discussed the importance of taking tough and fair decisions to get the deficit down. Now, tax policy is something which you always had to handle with care, but yes, everybody's supporting it, everybody's behind it. There's been no dissent.
Of course they're supporting it now. They've got to support it now, haven't they? Were they in on the discussions beforehand?
As I said, all the Shadow Cabinet talked about it with me and my team before Saturday's speech.
But they did not discuss it in a meeting of the Shadow Cabinet, did they?
We have had very many meetings of the Shadow Cabinet, including last Tuesday, where we discussed the 50p rate, its unfairness, but also the need for tough decisions, the need to balance the books. And I said on Saturday, we'll balance the books in the next Parliament, get the national debt falling, but we'll do it in a fair way. That will mean some spending cuts, but also fairness in tax.
Is it temporary or permanent?
We've said we'll do it for next Parliament as we get the deficit down.
Parliament?
Well, that's what we've said, for the next Parliament as we get the deficit down.
So it will end at the end of the next Parliament?
Well, look, I've been very clear. Nothing's set in stone. I would rather tax rates came down rather than went up.
It's temporary then, isn't it?
Well, it's for the next Parliament as we get the deficit down. I'm not going to say to you today what our tax policy will be for the Parliament after next. That would be completely perverse.
When the deficit is gone, so too will this rate of tax.
Well, we need to get the deficit down. We're going to do that in the next Parliament. In the next Parliament, we're going to have a higher top rate of tax to do that. I'm not going to say to you today we've decided on our tax policy for the Parliament after, but it is to get the deficit down.
They are linked. The reduction or removal of the deficit and the 50p rate of tax, they're linked.
Of course.
Right.
Absolutely. Our commitment to progressive taxation is fair, is permanent, but we will get the deficit down in the next Parliament using the 50p rate.
Sure. So if the deficit is got rid of before the end of the next Parliament, say it happens after 3 or 4 years, then this rate of tax would cease.
It would be fabulous, wouldn't it? Because we had a Parliament, this Parliament, where the government's failed to get the deficit down. You're saying to me, if I'm even more successful,
about your policies, not theirs.
If I'm even more successful, we will cope with the consequences of success when we find them.
So you'd love to see the back of it, wouldn't you? Because it would mean you succeeded.
Well, of course, I want to get the deficit down in the next Parliament. I actually said on Saturday, the sooner we get it down, the better. That will depend upon growth in the economy, some spending cuts and fairness in tax. The sooner in the next Parliament, the better. But the 50p rate will be there for the next Parliament.
Why stop at 50p?
Well, I think it's important that we don't send signals around the world. We're going back to the 1970s and the 1980s. I don't want to do that. I look at what Francois Hollande did in France, attempting to have a 75% tax rate. And I thought, that is not sensible policy in the modern world. But we are in a particular circumstance in Britain with a large deficit. We need to get it down. George Osborne and David Cameron have given a £3 billion tax cut to people earning over £150,000. I think most people watching your programme say, when my living standards are going down, that tax cut is unfair. Let's keep the top rate at 50p as we get the deficit down.
When even men who sat in government with you, like Paul Miners, like Digby Jones, when they say this is a duff idea, don't you just think occasionally maybe they're right?
Well, look, I think to be fair to Lord Digby Jones, he's probably been consistent in always thinking the top rate of tax at 50p was a bad idea, but that made him exceptional in the last Labour cabinet, because as Alistair Darling said yesterday, the decision to have 50p to get the deficit down was the right decision and supported by the Labour government and most people in the country. I think that's still the case today. Digby takes a different view. I respect his view. I think the world's moved on.
Lord Miners, who seems to question your ability to do GCSE economics?
No, I think Lord Miners was a Treasury Minister in the Treasury in which the Chancellor put the tax rate up to 50p. But I mean, it may be he made his objections to Alistair Darling at the time.
But you used to have this view as well, didn't you? I mean, do you recognise this remark? It was from December 2007. I don't think in a global economy you can start addressing the balance by capping rewards at the top without paying quite a big price in terms of your ability to attract investment and talent.
Sounds
That's
right.
exactly what they're saying.
It sounds right to me. Of course it's the case. You've got to have an economy in which you can have wealth creators, entrepreneurs who can make money and earn profits, invest for the future. But, Jeremy, at a time when the deficit's really big, they've got to pay the fair share of tax, and 50p is fair. What the government has done is given 13,000 people earning over £1 million.
I thought we were talking about your policies.
No, but OK. What I want to do is reverse a policy which this year has given 13,000 people earning over £1 million a tax cut of £103,000. Do you think it's fair to give somebody a tax cut of £103,000 when most people are seeing their living standards go down?
I don't.
I
Do you
really
share your
don't.
boss's distinction between predators and producers?
Well, of course.
You do.
Of
So
course.
can you give me an example of a predator then?
Well, a predator would be somebody who breaks the law or
So it's a distinction between criminals and others.
Well, a criminal would clearly be predatory, but actually a company which gets involved in cartelising behaviour, trying to organise and rig a market, that would be predatory. But somebody who is...
That would be illegal too, wouldn't it?
Well, it all depends, where the law is able to get to in terms
what
of
he's
that
really
cartel.
talking about is criminals then. He's not talking about a distinction between predatory capitalism and producer capitalism. He's talking about criminals.
If you take the case of the banks in the last 15 years, where as the time went on, some of the banks ended up losing touch with...
Which banks?
Well, RBS, Lloyds, I think...
They're
those
predators.
banks. Look, there were some banks who lost touch with what they needed to do to serve the economy, to serve their shareholders, and only were out making short-term money. Now, is that predatory or not?
Tell me.
I think in some of the cases where things went really wrong, Fred Goodwin, I think he stepped over the edge. I do.
He was a predator.
I think so, yeah.
Apart from this bogeyman, are there any other predators you can name?
Well, the thing I would say is that I want to have an economy which is long-termist and competitive. I don't want cartels. I want companies working to create long-term value.
I'm just trying to work it. You share the view of predators and producers. I'm just trying to find out what we're talking about when we're talking about a predator.
I think short-term asset stripping at the cost of long-term value, shareholder
so now we're
value.
onto asset strippers, are we?
Well, of course.
What about energy companies? Are they predators?
I think in the case of the energy companies, it is clear you have a small number of companies who've been acting in a pretty anti-competitive and non-transparent market, making big profits and not passing on lower prices to consumers. I'm not going to call that predatory. I'm just going to say the market's not been working, the rules of the game have not been right. We need to get the regulation right for the long term, get the investment in, and in the short term, let's give some help back to consumers. I think probably when we had the windfall tax in 1997 on the privatised utilities, some of the things which had happened in the utilities in that period were beyond the pale. Absolutely.
A long time ago.
Well, I mean, it was the last time we had a new Labour government coming in with a windfall tax or an energy price.
Can I ask you about something you said yesterday, talking about public spending? You would like to spend more in some areas than you did when you were in government, and, quote, there will be some spending things we wouldn't do and some we do differently.
Of course.
What were these things you wouldn't now do?
Well, I was asked about public spending under the last Labour government. I said we didn't spend every pound of public money wisely. There's some things we would definitely do less of, but there's some areas where we should have done more. Well, I'll give you a really good example. The housing benefit bill went up under the last Labour government, and it continues to go up. But we didn't spend enough money on affordable housing investment, and if you don't build the homes you need, you end up with higher rents and higher housing benefits.
That's an argument for spending more money. You're saying here...
Unless I'd like to have less on the housing benefit bill and more on housing investment. I think we didn't spend enough in the last Parliament on adult skills and skills for non-university young people.
Can you think of anything else you spent money on unnecessarily?
Well, personally, I thought the Dome was a waste of money. The Horizon project was something that we shouldn't have done. I mean, of course, it's the case there's particular projects where public money is spent which isn't wise. The same thing is true under this government as well. There's far more special advisors, consultants and those kind of things going on. The issue is, did the global financial crisis get caused by Labour public spending? I've been very clear and said we got regulation wrong of the banks, but did we get public spending wrong? That didn't drive the global financial crisis.
You were also one of the authors of all that rubbish about boom and bust having been ended, weren't you?
Well, I think I was the author of saying we should make the Bank of England independent and get away from political manipulation of interest rates and the kind of ups and downs of the interest rate cycle in the 1980s. I was also the person who said we shouldn't join the single currency, and there were very many people on my side and other sides who said we should join the euro, and that would have been a catastrophic decision. So we all get some things right in government. We don't get everything right. If you're a grown-up, when you get something wrong, you say so. We didn't regulate the banks toughly enough. Did we get some things right? The NHS tax rise, not joining the euro, bank independence, really good calls.
This is all history, of course.
Well, I mean, yeah, but
when we
if
look
you want to debate
now,
history, I'm happy to debate history.
Sure. No, I was actually hoping to debate the future, really.
Great, let's get on to it.
Yes.
Good.
Wonderful, isn't it?
Fabulous.
The economy is doing really well, isn't it? That makes life very difficult for you, doesn't it?
Look, at last, we're getting some growth back. Do you really think up and down the country at the moment, when most people are seeing their living standards fall, and in most parts of the country, there isn't new business investment coming through, do you really think this is an economy which is doing really, really well? That is cloud cuckoo land.
Well, the IMF predictions, for example, about the rate of growth in this country, unemployment is falling.
Good.
Very shortly we'll be
Good
at the
news.
target set by the Governor of the Bank of England for reassessing interest rates. I mean,
Good news.
it is all good news.
Of course it is.
George Osborne's doing rather a good job, isn't he?
Come on, Jeremy. Come on. In 2010, he became the Chancellor. He raised VAT. He choked off the recovery, had 3 years of flatlining. Living standards are down. Finally, we're getting some growth back in our economy. We're below where we were before the crisis. France is above where they were. We're doing
so
well.
France is a model, is it?
No, I was just saying to you that even France is above it. It's pre-crisis peak. We're below. Finally, we're getting some growth back. That is good news. But the idea that it wipes out 3 years of flatlining, absolutely not.
All this sort of stuff's going to stop, isn't it? You're going to be doing that much longer, are you?
Look, I had to do it for a year and a half longer than I expected.
Well, what are you going to do now?
The flatlining went, well, as you know, what I've been pointing out, Jeremy, is that living standards are down for most people in our country, and that's a reality. And that is why...
And growth is up.
Well, good thing. It's about time we had some growth.
Unemployment down.
Question mark.
Good,
Question mark. Why is it not business investment led? Why is it not export led? Why are we boosting housing demand but not building the housing supply we need? Is this a balanced recovery? Is it sustainable? Is it built to last? Is it working for working people? Is it fair? The answer to those things are no at the moment, and that is why business as usual is not good enough. We need things to change in our banks, in our energy company. We need a fair deficit reduction plan. Labour will deliver that. George Osborne and David Cameron, they're cutting taxes for people on the highest incomes, and everybody else is suffering. That's not business as usual. That's the same old Tories.
Ed Balls, thank you.
Thank you.